Have you ever wondered if your next trip could quietly put your health at risk? For millions of people over 70, retirement brings a long-awaited freedom to explore the world. But what most don't realize is that with age, travel becomes more than just a matter of packing a suitcase. It becomes a test, a hidden challenge to the body and mind, and not everyone passes it unscathed. Because behind the joy of scenic train rides, guided tours, and cruise ship buffets, there are risks that no travel brochure will ever mention. Recent data shows that adults over 70 are significantly more vulnerable to certain health complications. While traveling, many of which begin with small symptoms that are easy to ignore. A swollen ankle after a long flight, dizziness after a day in the sun, trouble sleeping in a new bed. Each of these might seem harmless until they become something far more serious. In this video, we're going to uncover the 7 most shocking health dangers of traveling after 70, and more importantly, how to recognize the warning signs before it's too late. You'll meet 2 very different people, one who navigated these risks wisely, and another who learned the hard way. Their stories will guide us through real, data-backed dangers and the subtle habits that can make all the difference between a trip to remember or one that changes everything. Stay with me until the end, because the last risk we'll reveal is the one most travelers never see coming. Comment number 1 if you're ready. Let's start with something many people overlook: the way long travel days silently affect your blood flow. For anyone over 70, sitting still for hours on a plane, train, or bus isn't just uncomfortable, it can be dangerous. Prolonged immobility can lead to deep vein thrombosis, or DVT, a condition where blood clots form in the legs. These clots can travel to the lungs and become life-threatening. The risk increases with age, especially if you're already dealing with slower circulation, varicose veins, or certain medications. Evelyn knew about this. Her doctor warned her after she turned 75. Never sit for more than 2 hours on a plane without moving. So on every flight, she chooses an aisle seat. She wears compression socks, drinks water steadily, and stands up to walk every hour. It's a ritual. Small, simple, consistent. Walter, on the other hand, dismissed it. "I've flown all my life. I'll be fine," he said before boarding a 9-hour flight to Rome. He took a window seat, had 2 glasses of wine, fell asleep, and didn't move for nearly 5 hours. The next morning, he noticed swelling in his left calf. He ignored it. 3 days later, he collapsed in his hotel lobby. A clot had traveled to his lung. He spent 6 days in a foreign hospital, alone, scared, and suddenly very aware of how fragile the body becomes after 70. Studies from the American Heart Association confirm that travelers over 60 face a higher risk of clot-related incidents, especially after 4 or more hours of continuous sitting. But the good news? Most of these events are preventable with movement, hydration, and awareness. If you're planning to travel, build in moments to stretch. Even just lifting your heels and toes while seated can stimulate blood flow. If your trip includes long drives, ask for breaks, even if others roll their eyes. It's not about slowing down, it's about staying alive to enjoy the next stop. Now, moving to the second factor that silently affects longevity during travel: dehydration. It sounds simple, almost too obvious. But for people over 70, it can be dangerously easy to underestimate. As we age, our bodies lose some of the natural cues that signal thirst. The kidneys become less efficient at conserving fluids. And when you add in air travel, where cabin humidity is lower than the Sahara Desert, you get the perfect storm for silent, creeping dehydration. Evelyn understands this. Before every trip, she increases her fluid intake in the days leading up to her departure. She carries a refillable water bottle, avoids coffee and alcohol during flights, and keeps electrolyte packets in her purse. She knows the signs: dry mouth, headache, lightheadedness, and confusion, and she never lets it get that far. Walter didn't think it mattered. On his trip to Arizona, he spent hours walking under the sun, snapping photos and skipping meals. He didn't drink much. Water wasn't part of his routine, he said. By mid-afternoon, he felt weak. His heart was racing. His skin was dry and hot. He assumed it was just the heat, until he collapsed outside a museum. Paramedics said his blood pressure had plummeted. He was severely dehydrated. Research from the National Institutes of Health shows that older adults are more likely to be hospitalized for dehydration than any other age group. The risks include confusion, urinary tract infections, kidney damage, and falls. And here's the catch: many older adults feel fine until they don't. Dehydration doesn't always make a grand entrance. Sometimes it creeps in quietly, masked as fatigue or dizziness. So what can you do? Set hydration reminders. Sip throughout the day, and pay attention to how much you're actually drinking, not just what you think you drank. Travel should expand your world, not shrink your health. The third issue is one that hides in plain sight: the invisible stress caused by breaking your routine. Travel can be exhilarating. New sights, new foods, new people. But for the aging body and mind, change, no matter how exciting, creates stress. Especially when it comes at the cost of sleep, nutrition, and medication timing. Evelyn learned this the hard way on her first overseas trip. She arrived in Paris full of anticipation, but realized quickly that late dinners and jet lag weren't just inconvenient, they were destabilizing. She struggled to sleep, forgot a morning medication, and felt off balance for days. Since then, she's adapted. She keeps a small clock set to her home time zone for medications. She eats at consistent times, even if others aren't hungry yet. She travels with sleep aids prescribed by her doctor and avoids packed schedules that leave no room to rest. Walter, however, sees routine as something to leave behind. On his cruise through the Caribbean, he tossed his usual habits aside. He skipped breakfast, stayed up past midnight, took his medications at random times, sometimes with alcohol. "I'm on vacation," he said, laughing. But by day 4, he was groggy, irritable, and confused. He couldn't remember if he'd taken his blood pressure pills that morning. By day 5, he was in the ship's infirmary with a dangerously irregular heartbeat. The disruption of daily patterns can have a profound impact on cognitive and physical health. Studies published in journals on geriatric medicine have shown that sleep deprivation and medication inconsistencies are linked to increased hospitalizations in older adults while traveling. The body craves rhythm, and at this stage of life, the cost of breaking that rhythm, even briefly, can be high. Travel doesn't have to mean chaos. It can be a gentle expansion of your world, not an explosion of your structure. But only if you respect what your body needs to feel safe. Another habit that often gets ignored is the assumption that your body can still handle any climate like it used to. At 40, a sudden shift in temperature might feel refreshing. At 70, or beyond, it can trigger a cascade of health issues, from blood pressure fluctuations to breathing difficulties and heart strain. What used to be a mild discomfort in your younger years can become a serious threat in later life. Evelyn is always cautious about climate changes. Before visiting the Andes for a guided nature tour, she consulted her physician. She learned how altitude can reduce oxygen levels, how to spot the signs of altitude sickness, and what to do if she felt short of breath. She took it slow, stayed hydrated, and adjusted her activity based on how her body responded. When temperatures dropped suddenly one evening, she had warm layers ready in her day pack. Walter, on the other hand, traveled to Mexico in midsummer. drawn by a discounted package tour. The heat was relentless, the humidity suffocating. He didn't pace himself. He wore heavy clothes, skipped water, and walked through the midday sun. By the second day, he was dizzy. His face was flushed and he was confused. It wasn't just the heat, it was heat exhaustion. Locals rushed to help him, pouring water over his shoulders while waiting for emergency services. Temperature regulation becomes more difficult as we age. The body's ability to sweat declines. The skin becomes less responsive. Blood vessels don't expand as efficiently. According to research from the CDC, older adults are significantly more vulnerable to both hypothermia and heat stroke, and many don't recognize the symptoms until it's too late. Whether it's dry mountain air or coastal humidity, your body deserves the courtesy of preparation. Check the forecast, learn about altitude, dress in layers, and never assume you'll adjust later. Up next, the fifth sign that many people dismiss: the increased risk of infection in busy, tourist-filled spaces. Travel brings you face to face with the world, and with millions of invisible microbes that your immune system may not be ready for. Airports, train stations, cruise ships, and hotels are environments where germs spread quickly. And for those over 70, a common cold can escalate into pneumonia or a serious viral infection within days. Evelyn is no germaphobe, but she's realistic. Before traveling, she ensures her vaccines are up to date, including flu and pneumonia shots. She carries hand sanitizer, avoids touching her face, and wipes down armrests and tray tables on flights. When she boards a cruise, she reads the ship's health policies, chooses smaller group excursions, and avoids overly packed buffet lines. Walter rolls his eyes at all of that. "You can't live in fear," he says. On his Mediterranean cruise, he shakes hands freely, shares snacks, skips the pre-trip vaccinations, and joins every group outing without a second thought. After 5 days, he develops a cough. By day 7, he's feverish, weak, and coughing so hard he can't sleep. The onboard doctor diagnoses him with bronchitis, possibly pneumonia. He's forced to disembark early and return home on an emergency flight, barely able to walk. The truth is, aging naturally weakens the immune response. The body doesn't produce antibodies as quickly. Healing takes longer. And exposure to unfamiliar bacteria or viruses in crowded places adds a burden your system may not be equipped to carry. According to the CDC, cruise ships have seen a rise in outbreaks not just of norovirus, but also influenza and respiratory illnesses among older passengers. And airports. They're among the most germ-dense places on the planet. Travel doesn't mean isolation. It means strategy. Protect yourself quietly, consistently, and without apology. As we move forward, there's a sixth pattern that deserves attention: the mental and emotional overload that comes from constant change. Travel demands focus, new environments, unfamiliar languages, time zone shifts, loud crowds, and unpredictable schedules all tax the brain's executive functions, especially in older adults. And while it may not show up as a crisis right away, the accumulation of cognitive fatigue can quietly unravel memory, orientation, and even judgment. Evelyn has learned to pace herself. She doesn't try to do everything in one day. She builds quiet time into her itinerary, stays at hotels that feel calming, and avoids sensory overload. When she gets to a new city, she takes the first afternoon to rest, not to rush. She journals at night to reflect, to slow her thoughts. She knows that the mind needs time to process new experiences, especially when those experiences come in rapid waves. Walter, however, thrives on movement, or at least he thinks he does. In Prague, he booked back-to-back walking tours stayed up late watching live music, and navigated confusing public transportation systems with little rest. On day 3, he found himself standing on a street corner, unsure which way he had come from or where he was going. He felt disoriented, anxious, and exhausted. It passed, but something in him shifted. That moment scared him more than he was willing to admit. Neurologists have long noted that the aging brain becomes more vulnerable to overstimulation. Constant novelty can be exhilarating, but without enough downtime, it turns into confusion, forgetfulness, and emotional volatility. This is especially true for those already dealing with mild cognitive impairment or early memory issues. The lesson? Protect your mind the same way you protect your body. Build in breaks. Choose quiet over chaos. Let the world come to you in pieces, not in a flood. Finally, there's one last habit that might surprise you. Assuming that medical help will always be there when you need it. For younger travelers, this assumption might hold true. But for those over 70, a sudden health emergency abroad can quickly become a logistical nightmare. Whether it's a medication issue, a fall, or a cardiac event, being in a foreign city without immediate medical support is more than inconvenient. It can be life-threatening. Evelyn never travels without preparing for the worst. She carries a full list of her medications, dosages, and allergies in her wallet. She buys travel insurance that includes emergency evacuation. She researches the nearest hospitals and clinics at each destination and saves their contact info to her phone.
Her daughter has access to her travel itinerary, doctor's number, and copies of her passport and insurance. Evelyn hopes she'll never need any of it, but she prepares anyway. Walter believes in spontaneity. He once said, "What's the
point of freedom if you're just planning for disaster?" On his trip to Portugal, he ran out of heart medication. His prescription wasn't valid there, and the local pharmacy couldn't find an equivalent substitute. 2 days later, his blood pressure spiked. When he finally got to a clinic, no one spoke English. He was alone, scared, and dangerously unwell. Older adults are more likely to face serious health complications while abroad, and yet, many travel without any backup plan. A study from the U.S. Travel Insurance Association found that only 15% of older travelers carry medical evacuation coverage, despite it being one of the most critical services in a true emergency. The truth is harsh. Healthcare systems vary drastically from country to country. Medications aren't always available. Language barriers slow everything down. And if you're not prepared, your independence can vanish in an instant. It's not fear, it's foresight. Travel is a gift. But after 70, it must be treated like the high-stakes venture it is. So, what does it really mean to travel after 70? It means walking a delicate line between freedom and responsibility, between adventure and caution, between the desire to keep exploring and the wisdom to do it safely. We've seen how long. Flights, silent dehydration, disrupted routines, extreme climates, crowded spaces, mental overload, and medical gaps can each become invisible threats. And through Evelyn and Walter, we've witnessed the two paths available to anyone in this stage of life. One path, Evelyn's, is defined by awareness. She doesn't stop herself from living fully. She just prepares. She slows down when her body asks her to. She listens. She adapts. The other path, Walter's, is fueled by resistance. He sees caution as weakness. And with each trip, his body pays a heavier price. Not because he travels, but because he refuses to travel differently. The choice isn't whether to explore the world after 70. It's whether you'll do it in a way that honors the body you've spent decades building. Every journey you take should be one that adds to your life, not one that steals from it. So as you plan your next trip, ask yourself, what small habits can you change to travel smarter, safer, and longer? If this video helped you reflect, comment below. Tell us your age and where you dream of going next. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell icon so you don't miss the next chapter in your journey toward a wiser, stronger, longer life.